There's uncertainty among Wisconsin farmers as China raises tariffs on U.S. imports to 125%.
The top U.S. farm export to China.
We don't want to be stuck in the middle.
In the endless fields of America's heartland, a silent apocalypse is unfolding. It's not a plague of locusts or a drought scorching the earth, but a man-made catastrophe cutting deeper than any natural disaster. The soybeans that once fed the world, that fueled rural economies and anchored communities from Iowa to Kansas, are rotting in silos, abandoned in fields and piling up in barns with nowhere to go. China, the colossus that consumed 88% of U.S. soybean exports, has turned its back, slamming the door on decades of trade in a matter of days. The fallout is cataclysmic. Prices have crashed to $9 a bushel. Silos are bursting, and entire towns teeter on the brink of collapse. This isn't a bad harvest or a market hiccup. It's a betrayal, a dagger to the soul of rural America, and its shockwaves are threatening to unravel the nation itself.
What many Americans don't know is how much their livelihood depends on these soybean farmers who produce most of the feed.
Iowa, the pulsating heart of American agriculture, is bleeding out. With over 9 million acres dedicated to soybeans, this state has long been a titan, its fields a tapestry of pride and prosperity. Farmers here didn't just grow crops, they nourished nations. Their soybeans shipped to markets across the globe, from Beijing's bustling ports to Europe's industrial hubs. But this year, the rhythm of planting, harvesting, and shipping has stopped dead. China, the linchpin buyer, canceled long-term contracts overnight, leaving Iowa's farmers staring at mountains of unsold beans. The price has plummeted to $9 a bushel, far below the $12 needed to break even, and it's still falling. Silos are stuffed beyond capacity, and barns are cluttered with bags of soybeans. Not because
it was more than $10 a bushel. That's a big decrease in prices, and not to say nothing of the kind of Midwest flooding that they had to deal with.
Farmers are holding out for better prices, but because no one's buying. In Marshalltown, a farmer named Tom stands in his barn, his calloused hands trembling as he surveys a pile of beans that cost him everything. "My son dropped out of college this semester," he says, his voice cracking. "We couldn't pay tuition. These beans were supposed to be our future." The ripple effect is merciless, spreading like wildfire through Iowa's small towns. In Cedar Rapids, soybean crushing plants have slashed operations to 3 days a week, their conveyor belts silent, their workers sent home early. Maria, a single mother who spent 15 years on the processing line, faces rotating furloughs that cut her hours to 20 a week. "I'm choosing between groceries and childcare," she says, her eyes fixed on a stack of unpaid bills. Truckers who once hauled soybeans across the Midwest are grounding their rigs. In Des Moines, a driver named Carlos lists his truck on Craigslist, not for an upgrade, but to cover rent. "I'm delivering pizzas at night now," he says, his pride swallowed by necessity. The state's economy is hemorrhaging. Tax revenues from agriculture are plummeting, forcing brutal cuts to schools, health care, and public safety. In Ames, officials debate whether to keep the high school open or the streetlights on. The silence on...
I'm here at the South Dakota Soybean Processors Plant in Volga, where South Dakota soybeans are processed into meal and oil.
Iowa's roads, once alive with grain trucks, is haunting, a requiem for a way of life slipping away. Illinois, the logistical engine of the Midwest, is grinding to a halt. While it doesn't match Iowa's soybean acres, its web of trains, trucks, and processing plants has long kept the heartland's crops moving. Decatur, home to some of the nation's largest soybean processors, is a shadow of its former self. Factories that once ran 24/7 are operating at 60% capacity. Their workers, like Jamal, a 20-year veteran of the night shift, staring at empty job boards. "No one's asking about shifts anymore," he says, his voice heavy. "They're asking if there'll be a job next month." Rail lines that carried soybeans to southern ports are idle, their cars rusting on sidings. In Joliet, grain terminals once buzzing with activity are now warehouses of despair, their docks empty, They're cranes still. A packaging company in Peoria, which labels soybean oil bottles, has cut production by half, laying off 30 workers. Sophia, a worker there, wipes tears from her eyes. It's not just my job, she says, it's my town. We're all tied to this crop. The rhythm of Illinois, its trains, its factories, its people is faltering, and the stillness is suffocating.
I think we are taking a wait-and-see attitude on that. We have a great amount of confidence in our Secretary of Agriculture.
Minnesota, a quiet giant in soybean country, is reeling in its own understated agony. With 27,000 farmers cultivating soybeans across its vast fields, the state has been a steady force, its tractors and co-op symbols of hard-won prosperity. But this summer, a chilling stillness has settled over the Southwest, where soybeans are a lifeline. Co-ops in towns like Worthington have taped signs to their doors, temporarily suspending soybean purchases. It's not about price, it's about space. Processors are full, demand has evaporated, and farmers are stuck with crops they can't move. In Mankato, a farmer named Ellen stands in her field, her boots sinking into soil that yielded a bumper crop. It's worthless, she says, kicking a clod of dirt. I can't afford to harvest it. Equipment dealers report a 60% drop in sales. Farmers aren't buying seeders or planters, knowing there's no market to justify the cost. A dealer in Montevideo sighs, they're not upgrading, they're surviving. Banks are tightening the noose, with a community bank in Albert Lea reviewing its agricultural loans, a polite prelude to foreclosures. Schools feel the pinch, with a teacher named Sarah in Marshall noting rising absences, not from illness, but because families can't afford gas or school lunches. Minnesota's fields remain green, but its hope is withering.
North Dakota soybean processors will give the city $100,000 a year for 15 years in exchange for not being annexed.
Nebraska's soybean crisis is a double-edged sword, slicing through both crops and its cattle industry. Soybean meal, a protein-rich byproduct, is a cornerstone of livestock feed. But with crushing plants shutting down and export markets gone, the supply chain is collapsing. In North Platte, a 3-generation family farm sold a third of its cattle herd, not by choice, but desperation. We can't raise livestock on hope, says the owner, Clara, her voice breaking as she watches the auctioneer's gavel fall. In Lexington, a soybean pellet factory closed in May, leaving 120 workers jobless. These aren't executives with savings. They're working-class families, now scrambling to pay mortgages and buy groceries. The state's budget is bleeding, with tax revenues from agriculture and processing plummeting. In Grand Island, schools have canceled after-school programs, and some are switching to energy-saving schedules, leaving classrooms sweltering. Nebraska's soybeans don't just feed the world, they hold its economy together, from fields to feedlots to factories. When they stop moving, the web unravels, leaving communities frayed and futures dim.
In January, the Trump administration has moved to cancel or freeze trillions in federal funding. That includes billions in funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Indiana's fields tell a surreal tale of surrender. The soybeans are healthy, the weather cooperative, the yields promising. Yet farmers are walking away, leaving crops to rot. Harvesting means paying for fuel, labor, and storage, only to sell at a loss. In Tippecanoe County, a farmer named Javier parks his combine, his face etched with resignation. It's cheaper to do nothing, he says. I've never seen a season like this. Equipment manufacturers in Fort Wayne report orders dropping to near zero. Farmers aren't buying harvesters when there's no crop to sell. Factories that once shipped 15 machines a month are lucky to move one. Welders and technicians face rotating leave, their paychecks shrinking. In Terre Haute, a diner near a factory is half empty, its lunchtime rush a memory. Folks can't afford to eat out, says the owner, Lila. Schools feel the pinch, with funding delays cutting extracurriculars. Families are pulling kids from sports, rethinking college plans. Indiana's balance of agriculture and industry, once a strength, is now a trap. Farms are stuck without buyers, and factories are stalled without farmers spending.
in the trade war between the United States and China. Some say it is American farmers, specifically soybean farmers, who reside largely in parts of the country that voted for President Trump in 2016. That is an intentional move on the part of the Chinese.
Missouri, the unsung hero of the soybean chain, is where crops become products, packaged, labeled, and shipped to shelves worldwide. But its plants in St. Joseph and Columbia are faltering, with orders down 40%. Workers like Dion, who relied on overtime, now sit at home, waiting for shifts that don't come. The conveyors are off, he says. It's too quiet. A food packaging facility in Jefferson City shut its printing line, a silent blow to 50 workers. Trucking companies in Warrenton report diesel sales down 25%, a sign that goods aren't moving. Diners close early, families skip takeout, mechanics sit idle. Missouri's steady hum is fading, replaced by a tension that hangs heavy in break rooms and parking lots. People aren't protesting, they're bracing, pretending it'll turn around while fearing the worst. Kansas, with its wide skies and fertile fields, planted soybeans with confidence this spring, trusting a cycle that's held for generations. But when China walked away, that confidence became a burden. Silos in Great Bend are stuffed, storage facilities closed, trucks parked along roadsides for days. A farmer named Marcus stands by his overflowing silo, his hands clenched. I waited for a buyer, he says. Now I'm just waiting for a miracle. Some call this season a total loss, with debts piling faster than the beans. Equipment dealers report sales plummeting, banks tighten loans, and small businesses, from diners to feed stores, feel the freeze. Kansas's pride, its land, is now a weight, its fields a reminder of promises broken by forces far beyond the horizon. The roots of this crisis lie in a trade war that's turned allies into enemies. China's withdrawal was no accident. It was retaliation. U.S. tariffs of 145% on Chinese goods meant to bolster American industry, prompted Beijing to slap 125% tariffs on U.S. agricultural products. Orders for soybeans, pork, and wheat were canceled in hours. Deals built over decades dissolving like dust in the wind. The Trump administration touts new markets in the UK and India, but farmers see through the mirage. Those markets are too small, too distant, too slow to replace China's demand. A $20 billion aid package, a shadow of 2018's bailout, is on the table, but it's a bandage on a broken spine. A check pays this month's fuel, says Clara in Nebraska, but it doesn't bring buyers back. The human toll is a wound that won't heal. Mental health hotlines in rural areas are swamped with calls from farmers like Tom who see no way out. I'm not just losing money, he says, I'm losing my family's legacy. In Minnesota, a teacher named Sarah notices students withdrawing, their parents too strapped to afford gas or lunches. In Illinois, a factory worker named Malik skips meals to pay rent, his pride swallowed with every empty plate. In Iowa, a young farmer's daughter named Lily decides against taking over the family farm, choosing a city job instead. I can't watch my parents lose everything, she says. The trust that held rural America together is unraveling. Farmers once believed in markets, in government, in the promise of hard work. Now they feel like pawns in a geopolitical chess match, their livelihoods sacrificed for tariffs and posturing. The economic ripple is a tsunami. In Iowa, tax revenues are down, slashing school budgets and hospital funds. In Nebraska, cattle ranchers sell herds, disrupting a cycle of profit and growth. In Missouri, trucking companies idle rigs, cutting jobs and local spending. Across the heartland, equipment dealers, diners, and schools feel the squeeze. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's cancellation of $218 million in Food for Progress grain shipments didn't just cost revenue, it cost allies, with nations like Nigeria turning to Brazil for grain. The Food and Agriculture Organization warns that disruptions could spike global food prices, threatening vulnerable economies in Africa and Asia. More than 9 million U.S. jobs, truckers, mechanics, bankers, depend on agriculture. When soybeans stop moving, the economy stalls. From rural main streets to urban ports, the global stage is shifting under America's feet. China's pivot to Brazil, Argentina, and Canada isn't a temporary snub. It's a strategic realignment. Long-term contracts with these nations are locking the U.S. out, potentially for decades. Brazil's fields are expanding, its ports buzzing, while American silos overflow. In Nigeria, families face rising food prices as U.S. grain shipments dwindle. In Bangladesh, markets brace for shortages, their reliance on American soybeans fading. The world is moving on, forging new trade routes while the U.S. heartland stands still. Even domestic demand, ethanol plants, livestock feed, can't absorb the surplus. The numbers are stark. Last year, the U.S. shipped 1.4 million metric tons of soybeans to China in 2 months. This year, it's barely 78,000. The collapse isn't a slide, it's a nosedive. The future is a fog of dread. If China's new trade paths solidify, U.S. farmers could lose markets for a generation. Prices could drop to $7 a bushel, pushing thousands of farms into foreclosure. Rural towns could become ghost towns, their main streets boarded up, their youth fleeing for cities. A prolonged crisis could ripple beyond agriculture, driving inflation as food and fuel costs climb. Schools could close, hospitals could shutter, and communities could fracture. Diplomacy could rebuild trade ties, but trust is a relic, and China's contracts with Brazil are ironclad. A $28 billion relief effort from the last trade war left many farmers empty-handed, and skepticism runs deep. We don't need checks, says Javier in Indiana. We need a future. This crisis has historical echoes. The 2018 trade war saw similar tariffs and bailouts, but the damage was temporary, cushioned by hope of recovery. This time, the wound is deeper. China's shift isn't a tactic, it's a strategy, fueled by years of escalating tensions. The U.S. pushed hard with tariffs, aiming to protect jobs, but the heartland paid the price. Farmers remember the promises, new markets, fair deals that never materialized. Now they face a reckoning. A system that once rewarded hard work is breaking under the weight of global politics. In Iowa, a farmer named Ben, whose grandfather survived the Great Depression, sees parallels. Back then it was drought and debt, he says. Now it's tariffs and betrayal. Same feeling, different enemy. The cultural toll is as profound as the economic. Farming isn't just a job, it's an identity, a legacy passed through generations. In Nebraska, Clara's cattle auction feels like a funeral for her family's heritage. In Minnesota, Ellen's unharvested fields are a betrayal of her father's teachings. In Kansas, Marcus's overflowing silo is a monument to a broken promise. Young people are leaving, unwilling to gamble on a future that looks like a losing bet. Schools lose students, churches lose congregants, towns lose their heartbeat. The social fabric of rural America is fraying, its values, resilience, community, trust, eroding under the weight of uncertainty. The world is watching, but not waiting. Brazil ramps up production, its fields swallowing markets America once owned. Argentina expands ports. Canada upgrades rail lines, while U.S. infrastructure, roads, storage, terminals, sits underfunded and overwhelmed. In Chicago, traders dump soybean futures, signaling panic. Ports in Louisiana see containers idle, their cranes still. The Federal Reserve eyes inflation, knowing food and fuel costs could spike. The ripple reaches beyond farms, threatening 9 million jobs in transportation, manufacturing, and finance. In Missouri, a trucking dispatcher named Rachel sees her routes dry up. No beans, no loads, she says. No loads, no paycheck. In Illinois, a factory worker named Luis skips doctor visits to afford gas. I'm healthy enough, he says, but his cough tells a different story. The future could be grim or grimmer. A prolonged collapse could push soybean prices below $6 a bushel, bankrupting farms and gutting rural economies. Towns could shrink to shells, their schools closed, their hospitals shuttered. Inflation could surge, hitting urban consumers with $10 loaves of bread and $5 gas. Global food shortages could spark unrest in vulnerable nations from Nigeria to Yemen. Diplomacy could reopen China's ports, but it's a long shot. Beijing's trust is gone, and its new suppliers are cheaper. Infrastructure investment, better roads, modern storage could ease the pain, but it's years away. Military tensions, if escalated, could complicate trade further, with China leveraging its economic power to isolate the U.S. farmers, like Tom, aren't just fighting for profit. They're fighting for survival, for a way of life that's slipping through their fingers. This isn't a tough season, it's a reckoning. America's heartland isn't just losing crops, it's losing its rhythm, its trust, its soul. Every decision, planting, harvesting, hiring, feels like rolling dice. Farmers like Ellen skip planting, risking spoilage for a rebound. That's a mirage. Others, like Marcus, sell equipment to pay debts, unsure if they'll farm again. Schools cut programs, families cut dreams, towns cut hope. The soybean collapse isn't a trade misstep, it's a fracture in the system that feeds the nation. If America's farmers can't keep going, who will fill its tables? The clock is ticking. A bold trade strategy, investment in infrastructure, and policies that shield farmers could turn this around. But time is running out. Share this if you believe the heartland deserves a voice. The question burns. Is America protecting its roots or letting them wither to prove a point?